And we're going to talk about something really fun now. And that thing that we're going to talk about that is really fun is the concept of rockabilly music. We have with us Dale Rushing, the development advisor for the Rockabilly Hall of Fame. Dale, how you doing this morning?
I am doing fantastic. I appreciate you having me on this morning.
Definitely, definitely. Well, yeah, as you know, we like music in Mississippi. I think that's fairly safe to say. Our slogan is the birthplace of America's music. Why do we feel like rockabilly is underrepresented in Mississippi?
You know, rockabilly music in Mississippi is really kind of taking a back seat. Although, out of all the genres that you can possibly say we actually can lay claim to, we probably are closer to developing rockabilly than anybody else in the United States. And it all goes back to the Black Prairie Belt music, what's called boogie alley. Lucille Bowell sang about boogie alley, but rockabilly is really a breakdown of just a boogie-woogie infusion with a little bit of either blues or country mixed in there, a little folkish sound, and that's kind of where it developed from. And we actually it was around before Elvis was in 1954. I'll put it that way. So
it's been around
some great
for
history
a minute, and the best description I have ever heard of rockabilly music is, well, it's music you can dance to, and I think that's
right.
a great description of it.
Absolutely,
it really is.
I'm not really a genre guy. If it's good music, it's good music. But they kind of pigeonholed the rockabilly, hillbilly bop. It started off one time called hillbilly bop, and then turned into rockabilly. So.
And it kind of had a moment in the 80s. The Stray Cats came along and kind of revived interest in that style of music. Had a couple of big hits. Of course, to be fair, I think just about every type of music had a moment in the 80s at some point mixed in there. But music in a lot of ways, to me anyway, seems to have become more homogenized, at least in the popular music scene.
Mm-hmm.
And things like the Stray Cats aren't really out there, and they're certainly not on the charts anymore, but rockabilly is still there.
It's still there, and it's around the world. It's got a large following, and it's just kind of like you find these pockets where it gets real popular again, and that it kind of takes off, and really, in some ways, it kind of has in the United States the Red Stray Clays are just a little bit of that rockabilly sound too, and they're kind of a popular band right now. But it's out there, and it's being followed more probably now than it was probably 15, 20 years ago. There's a lot of interest in the history of it.
And that brings me to the topic. We have the Grammy Museum, we have the Country Music Museum, we have all these different things. Could we get a rockabilly museum? Do you think there's room for that in Mississippi?
I absolutely do. In fact, at one time, there was online a Rockabilly Hall of Fame. Bob Timbers had it, and that's what we've acquired. I say we. The Hall of Fame group has acquired. And there was also another building in Jackson, Tennessee called the International Rockabilly Hall of Fame. And both those gentlemen have passed away. There's no longer a brick and mortar Hall of Fame. We are definitely looking at trying to create that, whether it be Mississippi, Tennessee, Alabama, but quite honestly, it needs to be in the Mississippi side because although we had Elvis, we had tons of other people that recorded at Sun Records and was involved in that rockabilly sound.
Well, do you think there's an argument to be made that a lot of the foundations of the rockabilly sound started in Mississippi?
I think there's a good argument of that. And case in point, Carl Perkins recorded in 1951 at Eastview, Tennessee, on the Mississippi-Tennessee line, just outside Alcorn County in Mississippi. And he recorded Wine Spodio and Good Rockin' at Night, which it wasn't all the way rockabilly, but it was getting there. Still had a little bit of country sound to it. But another guy from that area, Burnsville, Mississippi, up there, Pete Powell, was one of Bill Monroe's guitar pickers, and he was the first Mississippian they put on the Grand Ole Opry. But when they put him on there, they told him his guitar playing was too progressive. And if you listen to Pete Powell and Carl Perkins, you'll start hearing some similarities of how those guys picked. And Carl played in and around Alcorn County up there. In fact, he got married in Alcorn County, Mississippi. But of course, then you got Elvis with his influence that he as a child got influenced in Mississippi, so he was familiar with that sound. And then Scotty Moore from Jackson, Tennessee, where Carl Perkins is from. And what created that whole thing was there were some guys in Meridian, Cooney Vaughn, the Mississippi Juke Band recorded the first rock and roll songs in Hattiesburg in 1936. But the train, the Gulf Mobile, Ohio train, had a daily train that run from Meridian to Jackson, Tennessee. And those guys that were playing that boogie-woogie style music, they could hop the train in Meridian. They could be in Tupelo tonight, late in the afternoon, or be in Jackson, Tennessee, for that goes. But they permeated that corridor with that boogie woogie sound, and the further north you went, more country sounding it became, till you got to a point where it was just rockabilly, basically.
Well, we're talking about forming a Hall of Fame for rockabilly. Is there anything else we can do to promote it and kind of keep it in the public consciousness, in the public eye? Because we have had some bands that have had big success that kind of brought some attention to it, but I think even when they did, nobody knew what the term rockabilly was.
Right.
Even while they were popular, they didn't recognize it for the distinct style that it is. Is there anything that can be done to help promote that?
Yeah, we're working on a rockabilly marker, Hall of Fame endorsed markers, like similar to the Blues Trail and the Country Music Trail in Mississippi. And so we're doing that. We're working on some murals that may kind of factor into some of that, and then just the history side of it. We're trying to educate. We're trying to do some documentaries. So we've got some things in the work that will kind of help educate people along the lines of rockabilly, what it is, where it came from, how it started, and connect the dots. A lot of people like to factor in the Delta into that, but really the Delta blues really did not play that heavy of a factor into those things. It was more or less like Big Joe Williams and Bucko White and Howlin' Wolf out of the Black Prairie Belt that really had that boogie woogie sound and knew what it was, and kind of, like I said, permeated that area. And so when Elvis and Carl and those guys out of Jackson, they knew what it was, and that's the reason they picked up on it. Stan Kessler from Abbeville, Mississippi, phenomenal guy that played rockabilly music and played on a lot of hit records. And Marcus Van Story from Corinth, he was a slap bass king. He was a session musician at Sun Records and kind of influenced those sounds. So we have a lot of musicians that were at Sun Records, either engineers or musicians that influenced that Sun Records sound that we term rockabilly now.
What can be done to push this along and make sure that when the Rockabilly Hall of Fame is established again, or reestablished, I guess you would say, because I'm giving you full credit, it's going to happen, no pressure. But when that happens, what can we do to make sure it's in Mississippi?
Well, we are looking at a couple of different business models. In the old brick and mortar museum style, where you charge admission to get in, is, I won't say is as viable as it has been in the past. We may look at a whole different concept, kind of like Hard Rock Cafe had. Well, we may do something like a Rockabilly Roadhouse, where we have actually restaurant tied with shows and those type things. But once we get to that point, we definitely, money makes everything work. So we definitely need as much funding as we can from the state level, and as far as that goes, the federal level, because this was a music that actually changed culture in the United States. It just wasn't a regional thing. It actually influenced music around the world. So,
yeah, that's a very good point, and you're right. Money does make the world go round. So I would also like to mention, if you hit one of those several $100 million lottery things, Dale would gladly accept a donation. But I do want to say the Rockabilly Roadhouse. I love that concept. That's an awesome idea.
Yeah. Several years ago, before Bill Luckett passed away, my band and I used to play at Ground Zero a good bit, and he and I had talked about doing a Ground Zero in Northeast Mississippi with hill country rockabilly ties as opposed to Delta blues ties. And unfortunately he passed away, and so we kind of bypass that idea. But we still kind of looking at some other factors that may involve this, and doing some studies and looking at it. I feel like we're getting closer than we was 10, 15 years ago. I actually got Highway 45 renamed Rockabilly Way, and it runs into Rockabilly Highway in Tennessee. So from Tupelo to Jackson, Tennessee, the road Highway 045 is either Rockabilly Way or Rockabilly Highway, and we've got destination points